this podcast, we are joined by Sean Sankey from Much Clearer, MD and owner of Much Clearer. Welcome.
Thank you.
Come all the way from the northeast
Yep.
to see us, which is it's a real privilege.
Sunny Macclesfield, and it is sunny today.
It is,
glorious.
yeah. Sunny Mac. I mean, you know, you should get some lottery numbers or something.
Okay.
It doesn't happen very often. The luck is with you today. Sean, obviously you were in Canada, was it last week or the week before?
2 weeks ago. Yeah.
Doing a big conference out there, so we had to it took a few more weeks to get you on than normal, but a bit of context. First met Sean running a business growth sessions for the Manchester Growth Hub, which I was involved with a number of other Manchester-based businesses, and you're here because of the value that I got from it. So
That's really kind. Thank you.
For those people who don't know you, tell us a bit more.
Okay. Well, you mentioned Much Clearer, which is my business. So we set that up in 2011. We do a whole bunch of stuff. It's really interesting because whenever I reflect, whenever someone asks us about the origin story or like, tell us about where you've come from and that, I can't help but tell the truth about my favourite year in my career actually wasn't in what I'm doing now after I graduated university from Newcastle. So, because I had a year where I coached the university women's basketball team. Yeah. I was working in a call centre, taking complaints from grumpy customers. And then I was actually a nightclub bouncer. So down on the quayside and the big market.
Proper frontline stuff, isn't
really
it?
Stuff. And in a way, it was a year that set us up for what I do now, because there was a whole heap of conflict resolution in each of those contexts. Yeah. You know, I was getting shouted at with complaints. I was breaking up fights. You know, Geordie women can be quite aggressive, so getting in the middle of them playing intense sport. And a lot of what I do now through Much Clearer, so there's 5 of us in the business, is we get drawn into pretty high stakes projects. So where either a top team is trying to really spark growth, if a top team needs some coaching to navigate some difficulties that they're having, like at the top table, or where we met, it was the Manchester Growth Company came to us and said, we need an intervention specifically for people in the creative sector that are really trying to bust past this barrier of, we've been a small business for ages, but we really want to push for the next phase. Yeah. How do we do that? So the thread through all of my work is growth with a little bit of high stakes, sometimes conflict in there. Yeah. And that shows up in events and training and in consultancy with individual companies. And that's kind of what I do for a living, along with 4 of us that are in the company. Yeah.
Well, just a little bit then.
Busy boy.
I think, like you say, we talk a lot with business owners about what makes them good at what they do. What experiences they had, whether it's childhood or the first year after graduation, that really sparks an ability, a natural interest in what they do, and a confidence based on going from breaking up fights in Newcastle to conflict resolution in the boardroom, which can be equally as brutal, but perhaps not with fists.
So you'd be surprised like how many of the threads are the same. Okay, so because it is interesting to reflect on, so what draws you to what you do. Yeah. And as I've reflected on it, there is that thread of, I'm fascinated by why people do what they do, particularly when it matters or when they think it matters. So why does a fight break out in a bar, right? It's because somebody's reached the threshold where they're like, right, I've had enough of this. Yeah. Why is it that, somebody will scream at a 19-year-old in a call center that they've never met because of a stupid thing that's gone wrong in their engagement with an anonymous company? What tips someone over that edge? Again, they've reached a threshold where they're like, I'm going to do something about this. Yeah. So much in the corporate context, small businesses, wherever you have teams that are trying to make something significant, what can often happen is individuals or teams reach a threshold where suddenly they're like, right, what we think we know breaks down, and how much we trust each other breaks down, and suddenly people haven't got a roadmap for how they act, right?
Yeah.
And I've always been fascinated by that. So I've just spent 20 years observing, thinking about it, experimenting, being in context where that's going on, and trying to influence things towards, okay, well, let's, much clearer. What's much clearer about? Trying to influence things towards a point of clarity as to, well, what to do next. The strapline for the business is do less better. It's always been for me about when you reach a threshold where you're overwhelmed, or you're battling with each other as a top team, or you haven't got a clue as to which way to go to grow a business. The overwhelm and the complexity is the real blocker to growth. People talk about, we haven't got enough talent, we don't have the money, we haven't got the resources. In my experience, they're never really the blockers to growth. The blocker is the overwhelm and the complexity that a team is wrestling with. So someone like me can come in and go, right, okay, let's start to cut through that. Let's dissolve the noise. Let's get to a point of clarity where okay, we're trying to do all these things. Let's do less, but do it better, and then move through this threshold to that thing that we're trying to get to.
I mean, it was fascinating just going through those stages with you in that growth up. I mean, we mentioned briefly the conference in Canada. I presume that was a similar thing. What took you over there?
Okay, so I'll take it as a conference. There was
or whatever it was.
There was 7 people, right?
Okay.
But what we did was, so first of all, who's we? Tiny bit of backstory. So the depths of COVID, it's January 2021. And like a lot of people, I was having a really rough time, not just in business, but personally. We were all adapting to this crazy thing that was locking us in our houses. We're having to deal with, what is this isolation? What are our coping strategies through it? And so I'll never forget, in January, I signed up for this online 30-day business challenge, right? Every now and then I'll jump into an online course or a challenge just to, see what people are doing, to learn something fresh. So there's a guy called Garrett White in the States who was putting out a lot of content, and, he had some interesting things to say. He said, we're doing this 30-day challenge. It's $100. Come and join it. So I thought, why not? 800 people started that challenge. About 70 finished.
Wow.
And me and a group of about 6 or 7 others were part of that group that finished.
Okay.
And over 3.5 years, even though we've never met, because 2 are in Northwest Canada, one's in California, one's in Arizona, one's in Florida, and I'm in Stockton. We've been in and out of each other's worlds every day in a WhatsApp group. We're sharing all of our business plans. We're on the phone probably once or twice a week. We have a monthly Zoom. We've kept in touch for 3.5 years, but we've never met in person.
Right.
So early this year, I say to the guys, come on, this is ridiculous. We need to meet in person.
Yeah.
We're doing a lot of stuff together, but we've never actually met the unpixelated versions of each other, right? It's too much to ask you guys to fly over to Europe, so I'll tell you what, I'll come to you. So we basically, off our own back, decided to, let's do a little summit. Let's brand it. Let's get T-shirts. Let's put some organization to it. We're going to book an amazing Airbnb that we spend far too much money on with a hot tub and a fire pit, and we'll go sea kayaking and hiking, and let's make it a real lifetime event. So the 7 of us decided to do it. So I flew over. We had a session plan, and we had 6 days of just 7 business leaders. Being together, wall to wall, from getting up at 5 all the way through to, having a fire and then a hot tub and then rolling into bed at 10. Yeah. Just an intensive 5 days of, we did some growth workshops. We all did presentations out of the things that we're good at. We've got one guy who runs a chain of accountancy firms. We've got one guy who is a tech startup founder. We've got another guy who's an online fitness dude who's, made millions in his online fitness product. And we've all got a different zone of genius. So we were doing presentations and that, but really it was just the time with other peers that are trying to do meaningful stuff where you could have chats in the margins. So it was the chats in the hot tub, next to the fire, when we were out hiking. That was just so kind of transformational and transformation is often like a cheesy, overused word, but genuinely, those 6 days was transformative because of the commitments of a bunch of peers saying, no, let's do this for us, let's do this for our businesses, let's do this for our families. And that's what I came back from and posted those photos on LinkedIn and was like, I've just done this, there's so much I've learned, there's so much, I can't even get it into one LinkedIn post, so give me a bit of time. So yeah, I'm still chewing through all of those like learnings and experiences. But yeah, that was what Canada was.
I suppose that's what made me start this podcast, because over the 2 years I'd been to as many networking groups as I could. I had conversations with people, and they do the 3 minutes, and we're all bored by it because you probably heard it 10 times and it's exactly the same. But actually, it was talking to them afterwards. So what do you do outside of work? Have you got family? How did you get into this? And those were the interesting bits, which gave them credibility to me for other things that they were telling me, maybe bits of advice about what I was doing and from the experiences they'd had. And I feel that is more interesting, and you get a lot of value from than a presentation, I suppose, that's been altered and changed. And although they both work well together.
Yeah, without a doubt. and look, what you're getting at there, I think, is something that we really, I think about a lot all the time. I'm trying to practice with all of my clients, and we certainly experienced at this thing we did in Canada. You can't shortcut depth. I think everyone's really looking for depth now. We're 10 years into social media, right? When did the iPhone come out? I think it was 2007. So we're 15 years maybe into all having phones, and there's so many books that are coming out about being indistractable, which is one of my new favorite words, and a lot of commentary about attention span shortening and the effects of technology on the brain, all of that. Underneath all of that, we haven't lost what humans really crave, which is depth, which is meaning, which is let's go beyond the 3-minute pitch that we've all kind of heard a version of before, and we roll our eyes at. Like, I want to know you. Like, rather than hearing 23-minute pitches, give me 3 people that I can have an hour with and actually hear some real stories from and get some genuine insight from, you do print, you do SEO, you do social media, you do construction, whatever. What has that taught you? What are the lessons that you've pulled out of grinding out growth for 10 years in that kind of business? You can't tell me that in 3 minutes, right? But if we create and engineer spaces where you can have real time to go deep, increasingly that's what not just business owners, but that's what people genuinely value. Things that's becoming increasingly precious is to create those kind of spaces, and it does take somebody to create it. So you're creating it with this and with the podcast. I initiated it with that little crew to say, let's create something together where we engineer depth, right? How can we go beyond an hour Zoom call? Because even that, an hour on Zoom, where you can't touch and feel and see somebody, let's go deeper. And I think that's a universal across humanity, but particularly amongst people that are trying to do meaningful things, carrying weight, leading a business, growing a team. When we're so attention poor and things are pulling us left, right, and center, creating pockets of depth is critical.
It's funny. I from that group, one of the businesses became a client, a good client. But there's an extra layer of depth because we've gone through together a deep kind of review of our business and our business values, our own values, how we manage people, how you deal with people, who do you hire, why, and so when we meet, there's a real connection away from the SEO performance. It's like, how are you doing? What's going on in business at the moment and all that, and I wouldn't have had that without the sessions that we had. Delving into those sessions a little bit, you got there wasn't just you that gave the you know, who ran the sessions, but you all
these
had
were the sessions that we first met.
That we first met at the Growth Hub. But you all had such a wealth of experience. How what is it that you did beforehand that gave you the ability to do those things? What led you to that point?
Yeah. So we get commissioned by growth hubs around the country to do these courses for founders, for leaders. You know, we have an edge towards creative and tech, but increasingly we're starting to serve other sectors as well. And I guess, you know, that work comes to us because of the battle scars that we've all accumulated. So there's myself, there's David, there's Rebecca, there's Matt, there's a few others that, you know, all clubbed together to deliver these sessions. And we've all got different histories. Like if I put the logos up of like everyone that we've worked with, it would be that typical braggy logo slide where you've just got, you know, blue chips on there and banks and big charities and blah, blah, blah. It's everything from Rebecca, you know, she used to look after player marketing at Everton. You know, I've had big roles in large tech companies like Capgemini and, you know, done stuff with Google and worked in, you know, random places like Adispel at Ofsted, leading a big program of change. So, you know, worked across different sectors and contexts. And then I've done a lot of work with agencies, helping grow, particularly web agencies and creative outfits, PR companies. That was probably my bread and butter for about 6-7 years in the early days of Much Clearer. I was working in those contexts. So, yeah, the last kind of 7-8 years, I guess a thread that ties myself, David, and Rebecca together is we've all been part of, either as part of the team in-house, or we've been consulting to, you know, agencies and creative outfits and tech startups who've been aggressively going after growth. So when you've been at the top table in a bunch of different contexts, that can't help but give you loads of different stories, experiences that you can take into, you know, client engagements. Because, you know, it's those battle scars, the pain of, you know, having to fire a client or, you know, fire a key individual who is brilliant in terms of the results they deliver, but terrible in terms of the culture they create. You know, we've walked through that. So coming alongside founders and leaders who are faced with that and being able to give them some roadmaps, some tools, like some war stories, some, you know, some watch outs. I think one of the main things that I end up doing is kind of giving people advice to say, hey, listen, if you're going to try that, then know that this and this is going to come and bite you. So let's try and go, you know, don't go in that forest because there's trolls there. Let's take the mountain path. Right. So that's kind of a general overview. But I'm guessing you want like some specifics would be good, right?
No, I think what I was amazed at was the range of companies and levels of them and the different industries, you know, from education to PR to, you know, selling
intranets and like technology and Oracle installations and
massive brands and.
So I'll tell you one quick thing. So when I was in Capgemini, so after the year of glory with conflict resolution in 3 contexts, I did 5 years with Aviva. So Aviva, big insurance company, most people know the brand, joined their graduate scheme and did a lot of roles around the business there, including working in the company's strategy team. Right. So looking after the strategy for an 11,000 person business, you know, as part of the team, there's like 6 or 8 of us. And we were basically shaping the UK strategy for Aviva. After that, I went to work at a company called Capgemini. So Capgemini is, most of its money is made from tech sales, right? But they also have consultancy, which is in the UK, it's probably about 150 consultants. And we used to say in Capgemini, that 5 years in corporate consultancy was like 15 years in industry. Because the exposure that you got from spending 6 months in an aircraft manufacturer, then getting dropped into a government department, then going and working with a tech startup, and not just going and working there, but being charged with like doing significant stuff at pace. It was a real sink or swim environment, corporate consultancy, because you could either do that or you couldn't, because not many people can switch jobs every 6 months into a completely different sector and add value, particularly add value when the client's paying upwards of $1,000 a day for what you do, right? So anyway, those 5 years were also taught us a lot. They were terrible because corporate consulting is a horrible environment. Yeah. It's brutal.
It's intense, isn't it?
It's very really intense. And, you know, one of the reasons I got out of it was because, you know, when you're away on projects, you're at client site, you know, you're at a hotel, and it's normally quite a nice hotel, and, you know, but you're on client site every day, you're away from home. And what do you do in the evenings but just have dinner with your colleagues? And I noticed something when I was about 3 or 4 years into consultancy where, like, at every dinner I was having, when one of the senior VPs would come in for a day or two, I would hear the same story over and over again. Oh, well, you know, when I see my kids twice a month, or, well, now I'm on my 3rd marriage.
Yeah.
You know, and the same themes kept coming up of, if you make corporate consultancy a career, the data doesn't lie. It's very likely you're going to have a pretty fractured family life. It takes its toll on, like, you building a family. And I was just like, okay, like, I was at year 5 and I was just like, I can't deny the data. I don't want that for my future. No. So as brilliant as it was for giving us lots of exposure and lots of experience in different contexts, I was like, no, I have to go and do something different. So that's why I came out and then stumbled into setting up Much Clearer 11 years ago.
Yeah. Amazing. So moving towards when we first met, my memory of the actual, the first one, I remember being late because of the trains and being quite annoyed and sweaty at the time because I'd run from the station. But how did you start? How did you start it? What are the fundamentals that you in the framework that you run through with the growth of?
Yeah, the businesses that come on these courses. Yeah. Okay, so the course that you're talking about is something called Greater Connected. So, which is crazy because we've done 30 cohorts now. We literally did one, I think it was 2 months ago in the Northern Quarter. It started in 2016. We've had 30 cohorts, about 450 businesses come through Greater Connected. Wow. And about every 18 months, we evolve the curriculum out of what we're learning. Yeah. So there's 3 bits of content that have survived all 6 years of delivery. And I'll give you like 2 of the main ones. So one is this idea around there's only really 4 ways that you can grow a business, like organically. Yeah, let's leave acquisition, let's leave investment and that to the side. If you want to grow a business organically, there's 4 ways you can do it. You can farm. You can say, okay, there's businesses that I've already got relationships with. I'm going to get more yield out of them. I'm going to flog them more stuff. Yeah. You can attract, which is what most people think of as business growth. It's getting more clients, right? But it's only one of 4 strategies, right? So you can either get your existing clients to spend more, you can attract in more accounts, you can diversify what you do. So this is the video outfit that starts selling training. This is the social media business that starts doing brand. There's lots of ways that you can add to your offer, and you take that to your existing customers. Or you can disrupt, and this isn't about disrupting an industry, this is about disrupting yourself, right? Because what you can also do is say, well, actually, we're going to create a brand new thing and take it to people that have never heard of us. Right. So this is the innovation studio that launches an online product. This is a gaming division that suddenly sells a software as a service, right? Where you basically create a company within a company. And so what we do at Greater Connected is we help people really get down to the fact that, look, because most of the companies that come on that are 20 people or less, the small, time-poor, cash-strapped businesses. And it's like, look, most of you, because you're visionary and because you're trying to, make lots of things happen and you're entrepreneurial by nature, you're just trying to do too much. They're 4 very hard growth strategies that to do any one of them well is friggin' an effort in itself, right? And nobody I've ever met yet has gone, do you know what we need around here is a bit more chaos. If it would all be a bit more ambiguous, chaotic and confused, that'd be friggin' brilliant. Like, I've not many people who said that, right? And yet when I get people to stand back and go, right, what are you doing to grow? They realize they're trying to do 4 things at once. And so part of what we do is help people just peel it back and go, look, for a time, not forever, but for a time, if you were to give yourself 3 to 6 months to really double down on one of these strategies, to go, right, you know what? We've got a really great existing book. We've got loads of clients in our CRM that we just haven't engaged with for ages, or we've just been ticking over and we haven't really consciously managed them as an account. How could we double our account spend from, you know, the folk that we already engage with? If you did that intentionally and well for 3 to 6 months, what would that look like? Or if that wasn't right to do that, because let's say that, you know, you serve a sector which is particularly cash-strapped at the minute, or, you know, for whatever reason, you know, your client book is dwindling, right, jump into a tract, but don't play at it. Do it really well. Invest in some SEO. Figure out what you're going to do for PR. You know, go and talk at conferences. Make a big push, right? But don't play at it, yeah, because you're also trying to like launch this product and, you know, make people spend a bit more. Really zone in, because it's about doing less better, right? So one of the key things that we help people really focus on is to say, well, for a time, not forever, but for a time, count the loss of lots of things that you're excited about that are all on your plate. Because this is what stops entrepreneurs doing this. They're very excited about it all. And it's like the Energizer bunny that you've just got to go, right, let's just dial down your voltage and point all of that energy into 1 or 2 directions most. Move quickly, learn, we were talking about reflecting before, learn, reflect, see what the market is teaching you, and then if you know, double down on that or change course. But don't try and do 4 things at once that are like, you know, where it just feels like you're inching forward on 4 or 5 different fronts. And then you get to a Friday and wonder, why do I feel really deflated and like I've not really moved the needle on much? Well, quite frankly, without swearing, well, let's swear, no shit, Sherlock.
I always tell people about a part of career development in the previous role that I had was we had to pick something to do a presentation on that we feel is would be important. I can't remember half of it. One of the guys did a presentation on single tasking.
Okay.
And he said the human brain, male or female, isn't designed to multitask. No. And so he said the real superpower is being able to single task, but fully focus on that one thing.
Yeah.
And I find that all the best leaders that I've come across that are engaging, they'll always, you go into their office and they'll always put that aside and they give you their full focus.
Yeah.
Because then it's just the one thing that they're dealing with. And it always reminds me of that when people start talking about, well, you need to take the noise away. Do one thing really well. It's the same with social media, isn't it? Where we say, don't try and do them all. Do a few really well. And you'll see a lot more benefit.
Do less better. Do less better. It's like, honestly, yeah. I've not met anyone yet that would say, yeah, what we need to do is do more worse. Right? But it takes, like, that sounds glib. The resistance that people have to it is it's difficult to make the decisions as to, well, okay, what do we prune and cut away? Because it sounds nice. It sounds nice going, all right, fine, I'll just focus on one thing. That sounds lovely, right? And suddenly I don't have as much on my list. That's naive to just think you can do that easily and quickly. Because what you've got to do is count the pain of, oh, well, actually, I'm really excited about a lot of what this could become. And I've got to allow myself to kill off that excitement, right? That's resistance number 1, sure. Right? Resistance number 2 is when you commit to doing less better, what you're essentially doing is, and particularly if you're in a team, is you're saying, right, we're really going to focus in on this. I'm going to draw a line and say, we're going to zoom into this. Here's the problem. If you're on a team of like 4 or 5 directors, they all want to draw the line in different places. So it's like, well, what do you mean we're not going after that client now? Like, I've been nurturing them for 6 months. What do you mean we're shutting down that team? What do you mean we're not going to do this strategy? So people avoid the conflict, right? Because, and that's an enemy of doing less better, is people just don't have the conflict. They'll crack on with lots and lots of stuff, which actually they know should just get killed. But because it requires conflict to get to a point where it's like, right, no, we're going to put that away. We're going to stop doing that for 3 months. That's what stops them from getting to that place of doing less better. So this is part of the challenge, I think, that particularly like owners of small business, small growing businesses, that is the constant game, is to be constantly, not once a year when you do a strategy away day, not just when like, you know, an external consultant comes in and gets you to write some stuff on a whiteboard, but every day almost, you're having to practice relentless prioritization. Right, we're not doing that, guys. No, forget that, put that down, because there's so much demand that comes at you, when really the game is to clarify, okay, these are the things that we're committing to. These are the bets that we're making in the marketplace. These are the things that are going to help us grow. And there's real enemies to that. So we've got to have that conversation well and with substance.
Yeah. Hugely valuable to talk about, and especially with other peers that are having the same issues and why. And it's fascinating hearing all the different reasons for and for not actually just committing to it.
Yep.
You know?
Yeah. I think one of the most important things so if I have like a dark night of the soul with one of my clients when we're doing a one-to-one, right?
Yeah.
I'm really going back to the Dorman and coaching basketball, and that the psychology of how people behave the way they behave when there's high stakes involved. One of the really interesting insights out of psychology is something called loss aversion, right? So loss aversion basically says, you know, this isn't my thing, you can Google this, have a look at it, it's really fascinating. Human beings are basically wired as loss aversion machines. We have this, you know, we'll fight 10 times harder to stop something being stolen from us than we will to acquire something new, right? Because as soon as I feel like I own something, if I'm going to lose that, there's something in us as humans, which even the psychologists don't fully understand, but there's something in us as humans where we're just like, no, that's mine. Like, I'm not going to lose that, right? So loss aversion. And if somebody said, well, if you didn't already have that thing, you know, how hard would you fight to get it? The energy is nowhere near the same, right? It's a quantum difference. Yeah. Now, the entrepreneur's battle and the team's battle is like that. We feel ownership, particularly when it's your business, when it's our baby, you know, and it's like our clients and our offering, our brand. There's so much that we feel like we own, right? To make change inside of that, or to pare stuff down, it hits us in the face with loss aversion. Because we don't want to lose. We don't want to lose that thing that we feel ownership of or that we're passionate about, right? So we were talking before about maturity before we started filming. I think growing a business demands that owners, I mean, if you want to get really deep, it's not just about becoming a little bit better. Fundamentally, you've got to become a different human being. Like every 3 or 4 years, like the you 3 or 4 years from now, if you double your business 3 or 4 years from now, you know, and you're looking after 7-figure problems, not 6-figure problems, you're not just a little bit better. You're a fundamentally different person with a completely different capacity, resilience toolkit, and you've probably had to fight some inner battles to become that person, right? A lot of leaders won't do it, or don't know how to do it, or haven't got the toolkit to do it, right? And that's what I try and help folk with, is to go that version of you that leads the £3 million business where you're currently 750, you know, who's that person? And let's chase them down. Let's make that happen. Oh, but by the way, you're going to have to get rid of a lot of the stuff that made you successful to this point. Because 3 million you kind of looks at 750 grand you and kind of laughs at what you think is a problem right now. Right?
Yeah.
And so being okay with that and going on that growth journey is huge. You don't get business growth. If people are serious about getting business growth, you don't get business growth without personal growth. And personal growth demands an awful lot of loss.
Deep.
That's a short. That's a short for you.
Yeah. Clip that up. Clip it up. One interesting aspect. So moving on from the aspects of growth, one thing I was intrigued by was the session we did on business values, or you know what's important to you as a characteristic of a person or yourself or the business, and post-it notes, and then let's look at like which ones are most important to you. When we're looking at values, what do you know? What would you how would you highlight the importance of that? Because not everyone thinks that that's important
Yeah.
when it comes to running a business.
Yeah, well, I'm equally as cynical as a lot of people can be about what can easily become like corporate bullshit, fluffy noise and nonsense, right? So many companies, particularly large corporates, I don't want to chuck them all in the bin, right? But so many, I was, one of my good friends, he was an usher at my wedding. He's managing director of a big division of a massive UK property company. If I told you the name, you'd know the name.
Yeah.
And we were talking about how they've made a big push on all of these corporate values, and it's the classic predictable eye-rolling stuff: honesty, integrity, like all the things that you've heard a million times before. And number one, they set themselves up for like everyone just rolling their eyes because they're entirely predictable. Number two is they don't meet the real world, because in property, all those values are nice and good until, if you're someone that can make a £10 million deal happen, and you can do it by being a bit shonky, like that's the word you like, doing something that's a little bit naughty, but gets it across the line, right? Yeah. Okay. And suddenly integrity and honesty gets out the window, which they all see because it's all internal, right? Then suddenly those values are no more than a sticker on the wall, right? And that's where I start. I start with, if your values are just going to be a sticker on the wall, don't bother, right? Don't bother, yeah? It has to be sincere. There has to be something that is real and gritty about what you say you stand for as a business, right? Because that's what your values are. Your values are the things that you'll stand for, yeah? Especially when it's contested, especially when it meets resistance. What are the things that really drive you to do what you do, especially when it's contested? That's a good litmus test for if you've got good values, right? And like, if I take much clearer, one of the things when we were building our values, one of the things that I'm really glad we did was we didn't have the classic workshop where we were, just kind of throwing ideas out there and words and then prioritizing that. What we did is we went and spoke to 20 customers, and we said, just tell us, like answer some questions about what you've seen from us. Why did you work with us? What drew you to have an engagement? What did you see in how we showed up? And we just asked them to just give us lots and lots of words. Well, then we used that as the input. We said, what are the themes that come out through that? Because that's not just our projection of what we think is important. Yeah. That's kind of how we're showing up. So I think it sounds cheesy, but it's like your values need to be discovered, not built, right? You don't create values. You already have them. It's about identifying, well, these are the things that already drive us. And often it's the people outside your business that can give you that input and feedback the best. So for me, business values are all about, why you do what you do, and they have to be rooted in how you show up in the real world. It can't be an aspirational sticker on the wall type thing, because then people just get even more cynical about that stuff. So that's my take on values.
As often you can lose track of the values you started with and the reason why you started the business. As you grow and you get more people working for you, you're distracted by the workings of the business rather than the actual values and behaviours that made it grow in the first place. As well.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more.
If you were to give any advice to anyone looking to grow the business, it's an SME, what would you say? What advice would you give anyone looking to grow?
So two things. One, listen back to everything we said before about loss aversion, about how it's going to demand that you grow. Like that's not talked about enough. I think so many people think about business growth and they believe, which kind of connects to the second point I'm going to make, they believe that growth comes through good ideas written down on paper that are executed in the real world, right? And you might look at that and go, well, isn't that how it operates? And it's like, well, how many strategies have you written which looked really great, but ended up either on a paper or a physical or a digital shelf and never really manifested into the real world, right? Growth isn't about having a better strategy or a better plan or even a really amazing idea, right? It's about, first of all, committing to genuine growth of yourself as an individual, because there's things, if you really significantly want to grow your business, there's things that you'll have to learn, there's things that you'll have to do, which by definition, you haven't learned or done yet. So number one, business growth comes from a genuine commitment to let go of what's got you great to where you are, and then just almost humble yourself to go, right, okay, what do I need to learn for that next step, right? So that's number one. Number two is, once you've accepted that's part of the journey, your best teacher isn't a book. It's not a, dare I say, a consultant. It's not what that inspirational story was that you heard at like TEDx or whatever. Your best teacher is the market. Yeah. And this is why I sometimes describe myself as a recovering strategy consultant, because I do strategy consultancy at Capgemini. Right. And strategies are great and useful and necessary, but again, they often just look great on paper, but never meet the real world. What you're better to do is go, let's get enough of a strategy to get us moving into the marketplace, but let's let the market be our teacher by seeing growth as a series of experiments. Let's always be testing, always experimenting. Everything that we think, is going to work for our growth, we need to test in the market, And so constantly for leaders, it's constantly boiling down like a vision or an idea that you have into what's the 6-week test version of that? How can I put out a little prototype of that and test it with 6 customers and see what they say? If you're in digital, how can we put that into a landing page and just drive some traffic at it and see how it responds? Yeah. How could I take this new pricing model for this thing that I'm trying to drive and put it in front of, let's say, 6 people and offer them 2 pricing structures and see which they go with, right? Always be experimenting. So if you're serious about growth, embrace that journey of personal growth and realize that it's not about having the grand strategy, the 2-year, 5-year plan with the visions and the goals and the BHAGs and all that Harvard bullshit, right? It's about going, what can we do in short, rapid ways in the market to let the market teach us what it wants and how we should grow. Yeah. I think there's loads more I could say, but those 2 essentials are where I find a center of gravity around. If you're not doing that, no wonder you're frustrated you can't grow your business. Yeah.
Interesting. How do you measure success?
Me personally in my business, okay, which I think is revealing anyway, right? Because everybody can and should have a different definition of that. And that requires that you reflect on it. It's like, well, okay, what do I really want? Which is actually a much harder question to answer than you think, right? Because I think a lot of people get caught up, particularly leaders, in, well, what are my peers around me doing? What do they seem to want? What's going to impress my mum, my wife, my partner? What do my team need? What you want in the mix gets lost, right? So relentlessly coming back to what you want and crafting your own definition of success is incumbent on everyone, right? What success means to me at the minute is there's lots of these models out there, like you might have come across a wheel of life or, something that says, hey, beyond business, there's also your health, your relationships, like your well-being, the amount of fun you're having. And sometimes you can put it as a wheel and have each one as different axes and say, okay, well, you might be having a 10 in business, but you're a 2 in your health. Right. And you're a 3 in your relationships, right? So how do we get that wheel of life balanced? Yeah. Right? So it's a cheesy concept and I don't like the wheel of life, but it's a great way into thinking about how I think about success, because it is about not just what's the bank balance say or what's the P&L in your business or whatever. For me, it's about, and this was a real thing that we explored in Canada, how am I doubling as a father? Right? I've got 2 little girls, 6 and 2. And if I was to drive the business beyond the results that we're shooting for financially, but that was at the expense of not seeing the kids, traveling all the time, not being part of all those formative experiences, then absolutely I'm a failure. And I've settled that with myself. So it's like, right, success for me is measured growth in the business with time where I can take Phoebe to London to go and see a show in a matinee, right? Or being there for my daughter's 3rd birthday party. Because most of the consultants that I worked with in my previous corporate career, they missed all of that. Yeah. Right? So doubling as a dad, doubling how I'm showing up, like physically. Like I've lost a stone and a half in the last year. I'm really trying to get my health sorted. Like taking that properly seriously.
Yeah.
That's what success looks like for me right now. And yes, absolutely, like making more money, like building a wealth pile, being able to be generous, like putting money into different like places where it's going to do good. Absolutely, that's part of success too. So I think about success in paragraphs. So I can't give you like a really tight one-liner, but it does span those different domains. It's body, it's like spiritual being, it's like the balance of relationships, it's business. And for me, I talk about bounce. It's like, it's having fun. Canada was just part of it was just for me.
Yeah.
It was just to create something fun that I wanted to do, right? You know, I read a lot of fiction just because I want to. And I had 8 years where I was really driving business growth, and I realized, gosh, I haven't read a really good book in a long time. And I love literature. So I'm making sure I'm reading 10 decent books a year, you know? So it's a very balanced version of success.
And what brings you most joy in your work that you do?
Yeah. For me, what I so I have a little phrase that I use, which is like, feedback is like crack. Feedback is my work safe crack, right? The feedback for the event that you came to, or when I have a client who has me in for a longer engagement and we do like a retro at the 6 month point, and the feedback comes where we can see, oh gosh, I used to think this and now I think that, and it's led to like results that I couldn't have even thought of. That's what brings us not just satisfaction, but I love your word, joy. Like actual joy, when I know that I've made an impact in someone's head, so that then ripples into their business or life or family, which opens up new space for them. That's like a safe version of crack for me. And that's why I keep going, and that's why 11 years in, still doing what I do.
It's like middling a cricket ball, isn't it? You know, if anyone's addicted to cricket, you try and, you know, the joy you get from that is, you know, same with, if you can find joy in your work and you're constantly seeking it, and that drives you to do more.
So growth is a grind, right? Like it's not something we dived into a lot, but growth, regardless if you're a team of 3 people or you're a solopreneur or you're growing a mid-sized business or you're corporate, growth is a grind. The commitments to push and increase and make something new, it's friggin' hard, right? So if you're always going to be growing, because no one wants to be shrinking, right? If growth is going to be a constant, don't accept that, okay, well, everything is just hard all the time and that's life. You've got to find a way to weave joy in. So we've all got to find a way to go, how do I weave joy into this thing, which I'm also committed to, which is just going to be really hard, but ultimately finding a way to making it all rewarding. I think a good life well lived is one where you find ways to be personally fulfilled and commercially rewarded. It's both. There's no reason why we shouldn't have both, right? But both don't happen by accident. It takes intention. And you've got to figure out, okay, well, first of all, what does that look like for me? Like, what is fulfilling to me? And what is my version of commercial reward? Is it 80 grand a year where we've got a nice house in the south of Manchester and we're like, doing okay? Or do I want the yacht, the Aston, the blah, blah, blah? Like, whatever. Like, both are fine. But what sincerely do you want, right? And defining that and going, okay, well, this is really what I want commercially and this is really what I want personally. Right, let's chase that down. Let's go after that. Let's make that happen. And that's a lot of what I help folks find out.
Fantastic. Sounds like a good place to stop, but we could go on for hours.
We really could. There was loads that I had in my head that we would talk about, but we've not glanced at it. And I don't know, I think you've got another guy coming in soon, haven't you?
Well, at some point, it's not messaged yet.
Okay.
But I think from experience, to supply you with some crack, is that the thing that you guys delivered in those sessions. I think there was 4 sessions, maybe more.
I think the one that you came on, there was 3.
3.
Back,
Couple of hours each time, or half a day.
Yeah.
That's the most value I've got out of anything.
Oh, that's really kind.
So, reason for getting you on was that, and thanks for coming on. Hopefully we can get you on again and go into more detail on a few things. But,
absolutely, love to. Yeah,
yes,
yeah. We'll pick a topic and go deeper. We'll have depth on one topic instead of trying to cover loads.
Yeah, definitely. But thanks for coming over.
Hey, loved it.
All the best.